Good evening, everyone. Uh, been a good couple of weeks. Last week was for me a sabbatical week, so I'm always grateful that the elders give me space to kind of pull back and work hard at being a person of prayer and reflection. And not that you can't do that all year, but I think it's helpful. So like not just for people who are in ministry, but I would really suggest to anyone, you got to have some spaces in your life where as you're trying to, you know, if my goal is ultimately to get into the presence of God as one who is a friend of God and knows God well, over the course of your life, it's useful periodically to stop and kind of course correct. Maybe I'm off balance in this way or that way. Maybe I needed to get some new insights. But I've found consistently that when you open yourself to God in prayer and scripture and intentionally try to seek God's will, somehow mysteriously God always comes through. I always come back from these weeks with at least some little significant insight or story or experience that gives me something that I needed at the time. And this week was no exception. I was able to go over to this super cool place in Houston that up until recently I didn't even know existed, but the Lanier Theological Library, unbelievable place, and was really happy to get to spend some time over there. And so, one of the challenges of this Wednesday night format, like overall, I'm actually really loving how this has gone the last year, but it's not easy to get pinch hitters because if you're going to do this the way I do this, there's like two or three different sets of software you got to figure out. You got to have equipment and lighting, and it's actually pretty difficult. So at this point, I got my routines, but appreciate your patience. I hate to have when I'm not available, I hate to just have to cancel for a week, but right now that's just kind of where we are, and so thank you for your patience with us. Good to see everybody on here, and appreciate everybody's greetings there. Let's see here. I'm going to go on into my slides. I mentioned in my text message that went out that this is going to be the last of the classes in the Link series. That doesn't mean that you might not still want to get text message reminders about future classes. And so you can still use the link that I have here on the screen, rmd.at/KC midweek. Go to that URL and you can get text message notifications and just stay in the loop on what's going on. So we will continue to send those reminders out. And my intention is to start the next class next week. I ordered books today. I'll say more about this closer to the end of class, but I ordered books today. Quite possible won't have them to give out to everybody on Sunday. So probably this next week, rather than doing a hard launch into the class, I'll probably do something as kind of an introduction to what it is we're going to do, because I do want to give everyone the chance to get their hands on copies of the book. So as soon as we have those, we'll make those available to you, but just wanted you to be aware of that. Always good to hear from you guys. Frank and Becky, hope y'all are doing terrific. Let's see here. All right, class title for this evening is Building Your Dreams. I would say that a whole lot of the stuff that we've been doing, especially in the second half of this whole series of classes, a lot of these ideas build on other ideas. So all the stuff that's foundational about knowing each other's worlds, each other's inner lives. After you know each other, you work on building fondness and admiration. When you argue, you work on toward each other, not away from each other. You work on solving solvable problems. All these things kind of build and move in sequence. And so what we're looking at today is really like kind of the end goal of a lot of relationships. And obviously in this class, we spent a lot of time talking in the context of like marriage relationships, but I mean, they're going to be really meaningful friendships in your life and, relationships that you enjoy with coworkers and other friends that, maybe you do some stuff together over time that does have a lot of meaning to it. And I think that's quite achievable. So value in this for married people. There's value in this, frankly, for a lot of other connections in your life. So building your dreams, being an ultimate end of a lot of relationships, trying to get to the point that you've visualized, imagined, and maybe it's different than what you imagined, but for better or worse, still a really good thing. Some good blessings that come down the pipe as you go. We'll mention we will continue to be here Wednesdays at 7 p.m. And as always, would invite you to like our fan page, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and especially if you are interested in the series to come. I'm getting ready to launch into a series that will provide kind of a 13-week overview of the entire Bible and how it all fits together. I'm looking forward to that, and I hope you will plan to stick around and join us for the next part of the study. A lot of you have ordered books, and I'm happy for that. I hope that it's something you will enjoy. I thought this might be a fun question. I hope not to come up completely empty on this, but we've spent now, this is our 13th and final lesson in this series, but all the stuff that we've talked about, a lot of y'all are veterans in terms of your relationships. You've been married a long time. You've enjoyed your marriage for a long time. Obviously, we have people kind of all over the spectrum in terms of, if they're married and how long they've been married. But in all this stuff that we've talked about, as you think back over the last couple of months in all this series, I'm just kind of curious. Is there anything that you personally have learned from our conversations, or is there something that perhaps you already knew but have been reminded of? So I guess I'm asking for positive takeaways. Is there anything, since we spent all these weeks talking about relationships, trying to strengthen them? Joe, thank you for mentioning that, Joe. Yeah, let me know. From my angle, Joe, it looks like my audio is okay. And I've got a quick internet connection at home, which is part of why I do it from here. But I hope my audio is coming through okay. Thank you for mentioning that. All right, thank you for that confirmation there, Randall. Appreciate that. But yeah, I'm interested if you have anything you would share. Is there something that you would have as a positive takeaway from all this stuff that we've talked about? Feel free to type that out, text that, send that, and we'll like to have a look at those as we go. I'm going to dive into some other stuff, but I would appreciate that. If you have any thoughts about something that for you is a takeaway, something you've worked at, something you've been inspired to do, would love to think there was some positive effect to come from all this. So would like to hear that from you if you have anything to share. Okay. I wanted to think about a couple of biblical couples that I believe are a nice model for what it means to kind of build shared meaning. Ruth and Boaz and their story. You may remember the details. Ruth is widowed and comes back to her mother-in-law's people. Ruth is from Moab, so they would view her really as kind of a pagan. They'd want to keep her at arm's length. They wouldn't trust her a whole lot. And in fact, anytime you see her referred to in the book of Ruth, a lot of times they talk about the Moabite woman. Like they're all very aware that she's not from around these parts. But anyway, as the story goes, she's been widowed. She goes back home, really is this act of faith, of devotion, of kindness to help her mother-in-law. And as she goes out and works in the fields and kind of gleans scraps, she just happens to go to the field of a guy who can potentially be a kinsman redeemer, right? Someone who is able to take her and marry her. There had some specific laws in the Old Testament about if a person became a widow, how do you make sure they're cared for? What's the safety net in society? And the kinsman redeemer was kind of how that was supposed to be done. So the guy who is able to be your kinsman redeemer happens to own that field. There's like one guy in line before him. And so there's this great little romance of him admiring her from afar and her working hard and him trying to put some conditions in place to make sure she's treated well and not exposed, not bothered or molested by any of the workers or anyone else. And then she finally gets bold and approaches him and says, "You're the kinsman redeemer. I want you to redeem me." And so it's a great story of faith and healing and second chances, and God doesn't abandon us even in our worst moments. Like there better days do come. There's a lot of great takeaways from the book of Ruth, but if you just think about Ruth and Boaz, you may notice the end of that book has a brief genealogy on it. And what they're showing is that this, foreigner, this Moabite woman ends up being I don't remember how many greats there is in being a grandmother, but she is a direct ancestor of King David. And of course, we would also know this makes her a direct ancestor of even Jesus Christ himself. But I think about shared meaning, and I look at their story of how they came together through unlikely circumstances and just made the best of it, right? They just made the best of it. They loved each other. They found a way to be together, and brought a lot of joy to a lot of people. Like, you can see theirs was one of those relationships, like everybody was happy for that couple. Like, people liked them together. And but I'm thinking about that genealogy and how you can never really know the full extent of your impact, because their impact is still resonating, is it not? I mean, the relationship that they shared, the love that they shared, things have come from that over the centuries that, like, you just couldn't have even calculated or anticipated. But I would imagine even in their own time, there is just something great about coming together, having children, having, kind of an inheritance of faith and whatnot to pass on. I like the story of Ruth and Boaz. I like kind of the big picture of their relationship and the shared meanings. Here's one comment. Thank you, Cheryl. I appreciate the idea of the levels of familiarity that builds as you get to know each other. And that is super important. And I know we brought that up on a few different occasions. So, yeah, thank you for mentioning that, Cheryl, that kind of like at the bedrock of everything else, you have to know each other in order to be sympathetic, empathetic, forgiving, understanding, how to anticipate what one or the other will do. By actively trying to get to know each other, to continue to court each other, all that has a lot of good payoff down the road, doesn't it? So, yeah, thank you for that. And I'm, again, interested if anybody else has any thoughts on that. Anything that was a takeaway for you from all these classes. Second couple that I wanted to look at, Priscilla and Aquila. They seem to have been part of this group that, there was some disruption that happened because of the edict of Claudius. A lot of Christians were kind of forced to relocate if they were Jewish in ethnicity, because the Jews were getting on bad terms with the Roman government. So for a few years, there's no Jews allowed in Rome. And so, anyway, it gets pretty contentious. But meanwhile, the thing about sending Christians out of Rome and all over the world is they bring their faith with them. And Priscilla and Aquila show up at several points in the story. And what I like about them is the way that you do always see them doing something good together. They're doing something good, and they're usually doing it together. We meet them when Apollos has been preaching, who is, I believe it's in Acts chapter 18, but Apollos is a really eloquent person. And what we learned from Acts is he was really eloquent, very wise, was a great defender of the faith, but he didn't really have it right on baptism. He knew of John the Baptist's baptism. He didn't understand anything about the conjunction with getting the Holy Spirit upon baptism, which is what Jesus established in his. Fundamental difference between Jesus and John's. John's involved repentance, but Jesus, his baptism involves us receiving the Holy Spirit when we're baptized. Apollos was unaware of that. And you see Priscilla and Aquila. Interesting the way that she's often given prominent billing. I think of the times they're mentioned in Scripture, a majority of those times, her name shows up first. So we wonder something about, is she a little more boisterous and outspoken, and is Aquila a bit of a quieter guy? That we're just kind of reading that into it. We don't really know. But you see them working together in Corinth. They're in Acts 18. You see them working with Paul. They show up in other places. I believe it's in Romans 16 where they're referenced again at the church in Rome. But it's just a couple that you see several different places, and they just go about doing good. When you go around looking for the church at work, you can never be too surprised when you see Priscilla and Aquila pop up, because they are, they're the kind of people who do that. I wonder what it would be like for them. I don't know how long they lived, but looking later in their years back on some of their experiences, the people they met and worked with, and the fact that they did all that together. What a great shared life. And I know for us, we don't mention one without mentioning the other, but um, I enjoy that dynamic. I think that's a cool thing. Oh, here we go. Thank you, Kathy. Let's see what we got. Another takeaway. One takeaway for me from this class is to plan a time together to talk about an issue. I'm not good at waiting to resolve an issue, but I have been working on trying harder to plan a time rather than trying to talk about an issue the minute in it arises. That's nice, Kathy, and thank you for that transparency. And of course, sometimes we can deal with stuff immediately, but yeah, when it's a bigger issue and it's not possible to address it immediately, it is worth bringing it up later, and it doesn't make our conversation any less authentic just because it doesn't happen in the moment. So, yeah, if you're one of those people who prefers to just get it on the table and deal with it, it's a little hard to wait on those of us who are slow about making decisions and need time to process and all that. But when you're accommodating like that, I know that's a good and healthy thing. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Okay, moving along here. I want to share what we're provided as kind of like 4 pillars of building dreams together. So, thinking on top of all this other stuff we've talked about throughout the series, here are 4 areas that are foundational pillars to making this work and helping this to happen. Pillar number 1 would be rituals of connection. So, my question for you would be, what are the rituals in your household, your family, by which you all try to stay connected? True for husband and wife, but can be just as true for grandparents and grandkids or siblings or anything else. But what are your rituals that you use to connect? I wrote a blog post a few years ago that probably should have linked here that might be worth reading. When I first started my blogging, I guess it was around 2018, I wrote a blog post called Spontaneity and Spiritual Growth, and kind of unexpectedly got a little traction with that. Several people really resonated with it. But I was making the case that in your family, you probably have some rituals that help you stay connected, and over time, those shift and change. Now, the application that I was making for spiritual growth is that I'll go through a season where the thing that really helps me grow spiritually a lot is, maybe waking up in the morning and doing a lot of intense Bible reading. And then I'll go through a different phase where it's not in the morning, but maybe I carve out some time somewhere else to spend in prayer, or a person that I'm kind of meeting with, talking to, and we're working on each other. Like, there's a lot of different kinds of things you can do to help yourself grow spiritually. And I was just saying that as a family, there's a lot of different ways you can go about staying connected. And it is totally okay to be spontaneous in how you do that, and occasionally to change that up. You don't ever want to stop doing anything altogether. But the example I gave for my own family was that when I was much younger, my family decided to try a routine where we started going camping periodically on the weekends. We went to several different campgrounds. There's a lot of good ones in Tennessee, and we tried several different ones. Ended up having one really negative experience when my sister got lost and left her bike there on the ground, so my parents can't find her and see her bike, and no sister. So it was a terrible, terrible day. We never camped again after that, but that had been a ritual for us. And we went from that, and at some point started playing a lot of board games together. Scrabble was a big one for a while. We played that for a long time. It's like a few months probably. Then we kind of got tired of Scrabble. We went for another phase where we went as a family to a lot of the parks. Nashville's got a lot of beautiful parks to walk in, so we started trying to hit several of the different options around town and just walk nature trails. But it doesn't really matter what you do, but those continued efforts to stay connected are really important. So we've had like a series of rituals in my household. So that's an example. But I'm just curious, like, what would be your rituals of connection? And I've got a few things laid out here on the screen. Like, I mentioned mostly stuff that we would be doing for recreation. Like, what are your rituals around recreation? Do you have certain little habits or chants or inside jokes that you use and reuse? Like, what about the way you do recreation and fun together? Another big one for most of us is holidays. I will also say that for many of us, holidays can be something you really have to spend some time figuring out as you get married. Um, Having a family as large as I do, I'll confess that was a dynamic we had to work on. I'm married to a person who is an only child who had no relatives anywhere nearby, so it was always her and her parents. For me, um, both my extended families on my mother's and father's sides all live in Middle Tennessee. So the question of what are we going to do for holidays? Well, my family might have 5 or 6 different gatherings between all the different groupings, and that was a lot, right? So you have to sort through that stuff. But what are your holiday rituals? I can continue talking about myself and our families, but yeah, there's just a lot of different ways that when you do your holidays, who shows up, who brings what, how do you go about sorting things? Is there a game? Is there a song, a sing along? Like families have all kinds of different rituals, but those are all good things. Celebrations, are there certain, maybe it's not a holiday like Christmas or Thanksgiving, maybe there's also specific moments in your life that your family is going to choose to celebrate. Graduations would be a big obvious one, birthdays. One of the things I've seen that I will expect at some point I will probably also do. When I was in Arkansas, there was a family who invited us to their house for a blessing. They did for their son graduating from high school. They did a formal family blessing, and they had some really nice, meaningful statements they'd put together. And the father kind of stood there and put his hands on his son's shoulders and read. And it was funny. It was emotional. There were tears. Like it was a really, really meaningful thing. But in their family, that was a tradition that at the time of graduation, you pronounced a blessing on your children. Everybody's got their own things. And then communication. What does it look like for you from day to day and how you communicate? Is it we really connect best over breakfast? We try to always check in when we first get home from work. It's amazing how even if you're just putting in 10 to 15 minutes a day, like intentionally, like let's just say every day when we get home from work, or like let's say one of us might be at the other home, but when we both are there or everyone in the household is there, even if you just set a timer and say, hey, for 15 minutes, we're all going to find out about how each other's day went or one positive takeaway or whatever that's going to be. You don't have to spend too much time to take whatever that is, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, and multiply that times 365 and look at how much time you will have invested in your relationships. It doesn't really take that much, but spread out over time and done consistently, that can be a great thing. Yeah. Well, this is true, Joe. Blended families can make things complicated. That's right. Um, and this is good. Okay, so you've got a tradition since 1998. We have an annual 3,000-mile trip to Illinois, Kentucky, and Tennessee to see relatives each Christmas. And yeah, I remember several times, Cheryl, with y'all being out for a little while because you're making the big pilgrimage back to my part of the country and seeing a lot of familiar family. So yeah, that's a great routine. I'm sure that's something that y'all look forward to and your family looks forward to. But good to have those rituals, right? Something about it, even if it's tiring to make the drive, there's something about getting to do it and what it means to you that over time, like that becomes kind of a significant thing. And I mean, even as someone who just knows you, like I know that that's a thing for you guys. So it's cool to have rituals. So rituals of connection. What helps you stay connected? And the more ways you can create systems to encourage that. So make it fun, right? Make it fun and memorable and something you look forward to. But always keep something on the calendar there to help you reconnect. Rituals of connection are important. Next thing we want to talk about are support for each other's roles. Now, on the one hand, this could be true of like the male-female marriage relationship thing. I know that in premarital counseling, one of the big things I spend time on is I'll have both members of the couple fill out this big long checklist with all the typical duties. Who's going to do the budget? Who takes out the trash? Who's going to feed the kids? Discipline the kids? Who's going to like there's like 50 items, and they have to say, "I'll do it," he or she will do it, or we both do it. And so we let each of them fill that out independently of each other, and then we combine the answers to see what did they agree on, and what are the items where he says, I think she ought to do it, and she says, I think he ought to do it. That's one dynamic of stuff that we could sort out about, roles in the marriage. But I think it's important really to clarify these because, frankly, we just don't all have the same assumptions about what a marriage ought to be like. I can tell you, looking at my assumptions about what I ought to contribute, around the house per se, versus some close friends of mine. And, some people take more of a, we're in this together, let's everybody wear different kinds of hats. Some people are much more, I'm the man, I do this, this, and this, and you're the woman, and you do this, this, and this. As long as you're both okay with that, whatever the arrangement is, that's okay. But worth talking out what your roles are going to be as a spouse, but supporting each other in your roles, where I see who it is you're trying to be, and I express gratitude to you for what you do, and I try to encourage you along, because it's not just being a spouse that's our only role in life, is it? Like, that's just one hat that we wear. It's a very significant hat that affects all others, but just the same, being a spouse is one thing. You got a whole other hat if you have any children, trying to wear the hat of being a parent or maybe a grandparent. Whatever it is you're being, you want to be a good one, don't you? You want to be a good parent. You want to be a good grandparent, or you might want to be a great child or grandchild of whoever you're working with. But actively working at encouraging the other person along. Like, I know who it is I'm trying to be. To your point, Joe, about like difficult holidays, blended families, that's really like a key time to talk about this kind of stuff, where, hey, right now, despite how hard this is for me, we're going to try and make this work with, ex-spouse and step this and step that. And this is going to be hard, but here's the role I'm trying to occupy. Isn't it nice to have support from your spouse or your kids saying, hey, know this is hard, but thank you for doing what you're doing, and appreciate you being here, and thank you for biting your tongue when that thing happened. So several different ways that can play out. Also, as a friend, we've got friendships, and friendships also require investments, don't they? If they're going to be real and meaningful, that we do spend time with the people we're friends with, and sometimes we go out of our way to support each other, help each other along, and it's through those shared hardships that friendships grow deeper. So again, when those times come, sometimes, whether I like it or not, I might need to say, hey, this is the time for you to be a good friend, and I can pick up some slack over here, so you're able to do that. Same thing is true with our role as Christians. I'd like to think that being part of our church goes beyond just it's not just transactional, right? Like, I'm just showing up here because I need that guy to teach me this or give me this, or I want these people to give me this or that. Like, it's something you're hoping to contribute to through your life and your talents and your gifts. And so, yeah, what role are you trying to play in the charitable institutions in your life? There's a lot of other things we could bring up as examples, but whatever roles you and your spouse have agreed you're trying to play, a very healthy pillar for building meaning in your relationship is that when I have the opportunity to be a good involved church member or a really supportive grandparent, I know that you're going to support me because you see the value of the role that I'm trying to play. So that's another pillar, something that's very healthy to do as much as you're able to. Pillar number 3 is shared goals. This is something I have to say my dad was always big on. I grew up, and I distinctly remember watching my dad when I was a child. Around at the end of the year, he would sit down and write down, here's my goals for the next year. He had 5-year goals and 10-year goals and 15-year goals. And I distinctly remember him writing those down and trying to go for them. And several, a lot of them I know he was able to accomplish. But we can also do that as a household, where we say, maybe you even have a family mission statement. This is the kind of family that we want to be. Here's some of our theological values, right? Here's who we are in God's sight. So here's the kind of people that we're trying to be together. And because that's our goal, here's some of the things we're going to choose to give our time to. Um, I know some families that'll even institute some sort of a little trigger, like every time we see a person in need of such and such, we're going to make sure we do this and respond to it. I was at when I was in Houston, I went by to visit Lifeline Chaplaincy, which is a enormous operation. My spiritual director, Virgil Fry, has directed that for many years, and it's grown into a wonderful, wonderful ministry there. Their main office is located close to MD Anderson, and they do a lot of work in visiting and encouraging people who are sick, and they've got branches in several major cities in Texas where they provide that. But yeah, being able to see that and some of what they're able to provide for people, that was an inspiring thing for me. So thinking about family mission statements. What are we trying to be? What are some of the goals that we have? What I was going to say about that was that when I was there, there was one room. He was giving me the tour, and there was a room full of like pillows that they would give to cancer patients and dolls that they would give to children battling illnesses, and a whole nother set of things they could give to people who were in town with their family who just were trying to be caregivers. So because there's a lot of that at MD Anderson. But I was thinking of the families who've just said, this is going to be a mission for me, that we're going to, here's one category where we're going to make a difference as a family. And I think that's a great thing. But yeah, setting goals, having bigger projects that you're working on over the years, all that is good for creating shared meaning, achieving things that you've dreamed about. The fourth pillar would be having shared values and symbols. This to me is a little bit of an interesting one to try and think through. Shared values and symbols. I'm just curious, in your household, and you could comment on this if you'd like, but like, what would you point to and say, this thing hanging on the wall, that thing sitting on a shelf, this thing you're sitting on now or looking at, this symbolizes who our family is? I wonder if you have anything. I have, if you've been to my office at church, I have a pretty large collection of Mr. Potato Heads, which, with some of the recent controversy, I'm thinking I might have had a window there where I could have sold it and made off like a bandit, because I got lots of Mr. and Mrs. Potato Heads. But, I don't know what that says about me, but what I've said for years is at some point, maybe I'll be on the kind of budget where I can collect hand-carved stone chess sets or something. But I've always said, kind of jokingly, for now I'm on a potato head budget, and that works for me. But you've probably got something hanging on your wall, on your shelf, that if someone asks you about it, if you walk past it and glance at it and pause to kind of think about it, you've probably got something that gives meaning to your family. Yeah, this is good. You got this for sure, Joe. Musical instruments and refinished antiques. Yeah, anytime you go by Joe's house, you just never quite know what he might pop out with. And he's got helmets and dolls and wood furniture and lots of interesting stuff. And yeah, I know Jody especially enjoys the instruments and ukuleles and guitars. And I've got a fair amount of that stuff myself as well, Joe, in terms of the musical equipment especially. But yeah, sometimes it's possessions that you could point to that and say this says a lot about how we like to spend our time. That also takes the form of family stories. In fact, I kind of alluded to one of those earlier when I said, hey, like my family doesn't camp anymore. I can tell you why. Here's this terrible story I have. But we also have meaningful stories. There's stories that still show up that like my parents and grandparents have been telling about me since I did this thing when I was 3 or 4, and they still bring it up and retell it, and we all laugh at it. And that's been quite a while ago, but something about favorite family stories can help define us and give some meaning to it. There you go, Cheryl. Books and photo albums and a yoga mat. all of which matter to you for different reasons. But um, it's kind of like, when we do Senior Sunday and we celebrate our graduating seniors, a lot of times we'll have each of them take a table that they can just decorate however they want. I think that table would be a great example of what we're talking about. That probably whatever they put on that table, pictures of them doing this or that, or this thing that they own and like to use, sports equipment or hunting equipment or fishing equipment or whatever it is. Yeah, that stuff all communicates things about us and what matters to us, doesn't it? Another question simply is like, what does a home mean to you? When you think of home, for some people, that has to involve a larger amount of property to get out and run and do things on. For some people, home is really just wherever the people are that I like to be around, and don't need any particular space as long as I've got the people that I want to share it with. But that's a question worth asking. Like, as you're trying to create shared meaning together, to you, what's home? What does home mean? What do you want home to be like? What do you expect when you walk through the door of whatever you call home? So that's important. And finally, this fourth question: what symbolizes a well-lived life? If there were something you wanted to hang on to, what would it be? I could reference, again, going over to Lifeline Chaplaincy last week to get to see Virgil's office. I'd never been there before. And all around the different walls, they had a lot of framed articles that he had published, several like in our Church of Christ affiliated publications. He and his wife received a distinguished award from ACU several years ago for their Christian service. There are a lot of things I was looking at in there, and I just kept saying to myself, wow, this has been a great ministry, and this is a life that's been well lived. But I wonder if you have any things that you look at, and not just like from a favorite vacation or something, but something that to you says, I like part of what I did with my life. There's some chunks of my life, and I feel really good about how I used my time and energy, and this was a worthwhile thing, and this is important. Oh, let's see. Oh, got some comments coming in. Thank you, Randall. The story where my brother Philip hit the brake control and we rode a tractor down a hill into a creek. I bet that one has showed up a few times, huh? Yeah, lesson learned there, you hope. Laughter, that's right, Linda. It's nice to have a place where, laughter kind of says, I feel safe and I feel at peace with the world. Laughter is a nice thing to be able to enjoy. Comfy, safe, and personalized. That's right, Joe. So kid and grandkid pictures. Yeah, we've had lots of pictures taken and we post several, but yeah, we've got to print more of those ourselves. But health and friends, symbols of a well-lived life. Yeah, all this is good. All this is good. Y'all feel free to keep making comments here. We actually moved pretty quickly through the stuff that I had for this evening. I don't have that much more to share, and I'm not one to talk a whole lot when I have nothing to say. So I want to say a little bit in just a minute about the class that will follow what we've done for this class. But I'll end all this series with this one comment. Working on your marriage for a few minutes every day will benefit your health and longevity more than going to a health club. That's real science there. If you want to live long, if you want to be healthier, if you want to feel better and get more out of life, by actively strengthening your relationships, investing in your relationships, that will do more good for your health even than the time you might spend in the gym. Not that you want to neglect the gym if you can make time for the gym, but if you are doing the gym routine and not doing the family investment time, you should try to balance that out a little more, because it really does pay a dividend. I've seen research even on things related to addictions, for example, that you can take a person who's been fairly isolated and put them through different programs and work with them, and a lot of times they really struggle and continue to kind of fall back into it cyclically. But you take a person who is just surrounded with really loving, supportive friends and family, where they are, that's kind of the culture that envelops them, and the normal thing to do is to be healthier. We do tend to be like the people we're around the most. You just can't overestimate the value of good relationships with your household and your family. Yes, connections with my family, my Christian brothers and sisters. Yeah, connections are what give meaning to life, aren't they? Hard to make any meaning of anything if it doesn't involve anyone else. A lot of our best memories, not that we don't ever have special memories when we're alone, but of course, for me, a lot of those special alone memories involve something with prayer and God's presence, or, it was something still somehow connected to God or to someone else. So, yeah, that's right. No man is poor who has friends. That's a good quote. That's a good quote, and I think it's true. So our connections and friendships enrich our lives. It's been the real bummer about the pandemic that we've been living in the last year and some change. We talk all the time around about how it's not that it was a lost year, but there's some ways that it really feels like that, doesn't it? It is so hard to hang on to good things when we're not able to share them with the people that we care about, and even at the times we've been able to reconnect. Y'all have heard Kevin Burr make several jokes about trying to get to know people at our church when he doesn't actually know what anyone looks like. There's always the mask in the way. So he recognizes lots of eyeballs, but I think he knew Richard Scanio quite a while before he knew that Richard had facial hair. Same thing with Ron Pinion. So yeah, it's been a hard year, but those friendships are important. Yeah, Christians have a huge family. Jody always says she has blood sisters and sisters she has chosen. And this is true, Joe. And I think my own experiences with that, I know both our time in Arkansas, when we were very, very young, fresh out of college. We got married when I was 23, she was 22, and really just kids we were. And the way that church just absolutely took us in, invited us to holidays, like reached out to us, and we always felt like we had family because they chose to be our family, and that means a lot, right? It means a lot to have a church family who surrounds you and includes you, and we choose it, but it's also nice that they choose us, isn't it? So those things are super important. And let's see here. Okay, let me go on and say a little bit about what we're going to do next. I will start something this next Wednesday night. I ordered the books, waiting for those to come in. I'm going to get a few extras, so even if you didn't get a chance or forgot to submit something online, got a big list of people who signed up. So we will make sure that everybody who wants one will get one. But just communicate with me on that. So the book we're going to look at is called The Story of God's People. The way this is going to work is that there is a brief, it's all the chapters are brief. There's, I believe, 13 chapters, and each chapter in this study has some suggested readings. I think I tried to make 5 suggested readings for each lesson. This is the first book that I published, and I think it came out around 2009. I think that's the year that it went, it was published. I think it was in July of that year, but obviously I had written it ahead of that time. So I'm looking at, this is content that I wrote at least 12 years ago. And I've been away from it long enough that it's going to be interesting to me if it just bounces back into my memory, or if I feel like I'm reading someone else's work, because it has been a long time since I looked at this. But what I was trying to do with this book is that I feel like many Christians will, for example, get on some sort of a daily Bible reading plan, and hopefully you've all read through your Bibles at least once or twice or a few times, but a lot of times we don't really know how the pieces fit together. So yeah, I've got this book and that book and that book. One of the challenges is that, like, our Old Testament is not arranged completely chronologically, nor is our New Testament really. So it's not always clear, like, how do I understand the connections between these two books and what's the order they ought to come in? And so I wanted to make a book that, with really broad strokes, explains how just the overall flow of Scripture. And as a part of that, I'll try to suggest readings that fit into the specific sections I'm talking about. So, what we're going to be doing is going to be an overview of the whole Bible in one quarter. And my hope is that you will feel at the end of that like you have a little better grasp of just the flow of the biblical story and how a lot of the specific sections of Scripture can contribute to that. One thing we didn't have room in the book for, I actually created a list where I went down and suggested for every book of the Bible, if you want to understand where this one fits in, here's the chapter you ought to look at. They did not have room to put that in the back, and so I have that as a download. I'll try to make that available if you're interested. But that's the book we're going to look at. Will I? Yeah, there you go. That's right. I can do that. In fact, funny thing, as you mentioned that this pen, I have not published a book in a few years, but when I went 4 years in a row before y'all hired me away from Old Hickory, where for 4 years I published a book a year. And when I got my first book out, well, they did this every time, but the elders had me set up like a table and sign books for people. And so I thought, like, as a way to commemorate it, so here's a symbol of something for me. But yeah, this is the pen that I bought to sign books with, specifically this book you're seeing on the screen. So that's kind of a special memory for me. But again, it's been so long since I wrote this thing, I'm not even positive that I'll be in love with everything I said 12 years ago. I don't know about you, but I'd like to think in the last 12 years I've continued to learn and grow a little bit. But that is what we're doing next. And if I'm not able to get the books I ordered in time for Sunday, I'll probably give kind of a soft launch next Wednesday and do maybe something a little more conceptual. And then we won't really get into studying the specific chapters and the stuff they're related to until the following week. So one way or the other, we will make that work. But that is where we're going from here, and would encourage you to stay connected and involved. As always, if you've enjoyed something that we've done, if you found value in anything that we've done, like our fan page, subscribe to our YouTube channel, hit the share button, and send it to someone in Messenger, post it to your wall. If only, Randall. I don't know if you get to do that with curriculum books, but that really is a fun thing. This all started, even though I was kind of a utility player at Old Hickory, so I was their youth minister. I was also their education minister, and I ended up doing a lot of other stuff as I had opportunity. But it's like I would get these ideas for something that was really more of an adult class, and so I would put together these massive, like 12, 13-page handouts for each week and would teach through this content. And so that's where 3 of my 4 books came from, was that I would teach it as an adult class for a quarter, and I would have so much material that I could use that to kind of just adapt it for publication, and it worked out really well. So it's been a long time since I've done that, and we'll see. I need to get back into writing at some point, I guess, but that's been fun. All right, yeah, and thank you all for the all the best textbooks come in multiple editions. It's not boding well for me, Kevin. So thank you for the affirmation, everybody, and your participation. It's been a lot of fun, and glad we did this. Hope it's been beneficial to you. Always good for me to kind of pull back and think about the most important relationships in our lives, and if it's going to be something that lasts for life, it's absolutely worth trying to make it as good as you can. Anyway, thank you all, and you guys have a great rest of your evening, and we will, Lord willing, I guess, see you all on Sunday, if not sooner. And if I get some of those books in, I do have a few in stock in my office. I'm going to start just like using a Post-it note and sticking names on them, and we'll try to make them available probably there where you come into the lobby at church on that welcome desk, and try to make sure those get to the people they're supposed to. So y'all have a great evening, and we will see you.